Hello, I want to invite you to this particular discussion around note taking. Note taking is a critical area in critical thinking and also creative thinking. That is why you cannot claim to be a creative thinker or a critical thinker without sufficient command of skills of note taking. That is why I have found it essential that we spare some time to learn and demonstrate how note taking can be done. So I want to welcome all of us to this important and essential discussion in the area of critical and creative thinking. Let us begin our discussion with an understanding of what notes are and why it is important to have notes or to take down notes. This is what we need to do before we now go to the specific techniques or styles or methods of note taking. I want us to understand notes as a record or an outline of a speech, a statement, a testimony, or even a text that gives an impression of something. The emphasis here is an impression. That is, notes should be understood as a shorter version of a speech, a statement, or a text. But that version, however short it may be, it should offer sufficient insight into what the full text is. And there are many different techniques, methods, or styles of taking notes, and therefore individuals are encouraged to embrace a technique that works for them from time to time. There is no one single method that is good at all cases. No. Some methods are good at certain instances, while others are not suitable. And therefore, it is up to the individual to choose which method they consider best for them and also at different circumstances. Why is it important for us to have notes? One, notes enables readers to avoid an intentional plagiarism. Plagiarism means copying other people's words, works word by word. And plagiarism is not only an academically unaccepted thing, but it's also criminal in certain circumstances. So when we learn how to take notes, we are able to avoid plagiarism because we will not take up everything that a writer has put down. Instead, we take a few. Again, notes enables us to focus only on what is important in a text, in a lecture, or in an argument. Again, remember that some texts can be so many pages, some lectures might take so many hours, and not everything that is said is important to all people. Some people consider certain aspects more important than others, and therefore having knowledge of how notes is taken enables now the readers or listeners only to focus on those areas that they consider quite important to them. Again, notes enables us to understand and remember materials and also make connections. Remember, sometimes in a lecture situation, you are taught something uh, and an examination of what you have been taught might come several months later, or in some cases, some years later. And therefore, when we have notes, notes can enable us remember or memorize what has been taught or understand key points in a given text. Again, notes are also useful when we are writing our assignments, such as reports, when we are doing our research, or making academic writings and other scholarly writings. Notes become quite important because we advance arguments in these reports, in research, and in academic writings based on the notes that we have taken. Again, notes provide a personal record of what has been learned. Because if you don't take notes, sometimes it is difficult for a learner to track what they have learned and also the concepts that they have come across. Notes also enable us to develop a given train of thought. Lastly, notes are important in solving as well as understanding issues that are yet to be resolved. When we read a text, we are able to understand issues that are well and exhaustively explained in a given text. So we can take notes of issues that have been resolved through sound arguments, proper explanations, and also provision of sufficient arguments. Then we're also able to note what has not been properly examined or explained by a given author. So by doing so, notes enables us to know what has totally been resolved in an argument and those that are yet to be resolved. So notes are quite important. Let us now look at the various techniques of note taking. What techniques do we have when we are taking notes? And like I mentioned earlier, there are quite several techniques that are used. One of the techniques that often used is called linear stroke sentence method. The sentence method is simply writing down each topic and noting it down as a sentence. And the method involves writing every new thought, fact, or topic on a separate line and numbering them accordingly as one progresses with reading or listening. This method is now the one that is mostly used by students, where we listen to a lecture or we read a book and then we note down in form of a sentence the issues that we consider as important. Each line contains a given idea. Once we're through with noting down important issues are given on a given topic or subtopic, again we move to another line that way. So this method works well for fast-paced lessons where a lot of information is being covered. Consider, for instance, a case in which uh, lectures are being given or a speaker is talking, say for 2, 3 hours, and the pace at which the speaker is moving is quite fast. Then it is easier or it is possible for a listener to take down in form of a sentence issues that they consider are worthy of taking down while leaving out those that they may not consider not important as at that time. And in that case, you only take down what you consider as important. Now, in this situation, the listener can hear the different points, but unable to group them due to some constraints owing to the pace of presentation. Because a lot of things can be said, but you might not have the time or you might not have the speed to keep with the pace at which the information is being given out by the speaker. So in that case, you simply note down a few ideas in form of sentence that you consider are important and which, when you go through them, they can give you an impression or a glimpse of what the entire lecture was. This technique, that is of linear or sentence method, is rather requires listeners to use shorthands and other symbols so as to capture as possible, given the pace at which the lecture or presentation is being offered. Here is a case in which you find listeners using shorthand methods, they use symbols, and they use other techniques because you cannot write down all words or concepts in the way in which they're being said out. So you come out with your own ways of summarizing and putting into context any issue that you consider important. You use symbols, you use shorthand, and any other method that you consider can enable you to capture as much information as possible. Here is an illustration of how a linear technique can be. Assuming, for instance, we have a discussion and the topic is drug abuse. And within the drug abuse, the speaker or the lecture or a book or a text that you're going through has certain aspects that are under discussion with regard to drug abuse. Probably one of them could be the prevalence of drug abuse. The other one could be the types of drugs being abused. The other one could be the causes of drug abuse. And then the other part could be on the treatment of drug addiction. So this case, you'll just have a line, and that line, like the first line, you are writing the prevalence of drug abuse. The second line, you are writing the types of drugs that are abused. The third line, you are outlining the causes of drug abuse. And the third one, you're also giving out how drug addiction can be treated. So in this method, you are basically having an idea, then you jot a sentence about it. Once you are through that, you skip a line and you do another one, that way, until you cover all the major components of what the discussion was about. This is normally one of the methods that a lot of students employ when they are listening to lectures or when they are revising what has been taught in preparation for examination. The other method is called the outlining method. And the outlining method uses headings and bullet points to organize topics. The method is most useful when learning about topics that include a lot of details. Remember that there are instances in which some topics have so many issues to be covered. So if that's the case, then the most appropriate method of note taking is the outlining method. And in this case, each section will start with a heading of the main topic. And then that heading will be followed by the subtopic. And then supporting facts, which is written underneath each of the headings that have been identified. Let us see an illustration of how an outlining technique of note taking looks like. This is how it looks like. If we still continue with our main idea about the topic, which is the drug abuse. So the drug abuse, that is the topic, the main topic. Then that drug abuse has several subtopics. So subtopic 1 is on the prevalence of drug abuse. Then the subtopic 2 is on the types of drugs abused. Then subtopic 3 is the causes of drug abuse. Then our subtopic 4 is on the treatment of drug abuse. So in this case, each of the prevalence, each of the sections, we have to note down the notes so that under subtopic 1, what do we have? So we'll have subtopic 1, which is prevalence of drug abuse. Then below it, we will give out the prevalence. Maybe in the world, this percentage of adult population abuse drugs. In Africa, this is the percentage. In Kenya, there's a percentage. In the local area, say in Nakuru City, where you want to undertake your study, this is the this is the prevalence or the rate. Again, might also want to look at prevalence in terms of maybe gender, how many women are affected by drug abuse, how many men are affected. Again, depending on the aspect that you want to deal with. First, you have to come up with a subtopic, and then you might also even come up with the subtopics, other headings, other each subtopic, if what you want to deal with is more detailed. Then you move to the second subtopic, which in our case is types of drugs abused. Again, below it, you write the types of drugs that are abused. Maybe bangi, maybe cigarettes, maybe cocaine, among other drugs that probably are well captured in the text that you're reading. Then you go to the causes of drug abuse, you move the treatment of drug abuse. So in this case, you have the main topic, then the subtopics that follow. Uh, the other method that is followed when we are taking notes is called the Cornell method. And the Cornell method, it involves splitting the page where you are writing your notes into two columns, with the right column being bigger than the left column. The right column maybe could be estimated to be twice the width of the left column. Detailed notes are written on the right column, followed by the key points, reflections, the cues, and also the questions can be noted on the left column. Now, this technique is regarded as organized and also systematic way of recording and reviewing notes, thereby whereby major points and ideas are matched with supportive information. And the method is useful for developing on thinking, since having a response column alongside a column for detail and quotes allows on thoughts and reflections to be clearly separated from the reading or from the lecture. Information in the left column can be used as prompts to help a reader remember the detail or answers to the questions on the right column. Maybe let's have an illustration and see how the Cornell method works. So this is what we have as an illustration when we're using the Cornell method. Again, if we still go by our drug abuse, maybe through our reading, what the impression we get from that text is that the author has talked about what drug abuse is, how common drug abuse is, the types of drugs that are abused, the causes of drug abuse, and also the treatment of drug abuse. So in our case, we shall come out with the major ideas that we have found in the text. Now, those major ideas, we place them on the left, and then the details of them, they are put on the right. So for instance, the prevalence of drug abuse, that is maybe the major item that has emerged when we read a text, that the author has addressed the drug abuse in terms of four illustrative areas: the prevalence, the types, the causes, and the treatment. So those major areas, we put them on the left. Then supportive evidence or supportive information, we put them along, we match that with it on the right. For example, we have prevalence of drug abuse. Then we have A, B, C. These are the prevalence. Maybe A, we want to talk about prevalence in terms of the global prevalence. B, we want to talk about the regional prevalence. C, maybe we want to talk about the local prevalence. Then we talk about the types of drugs abused. Again, we have types that fall under, say, category A, category B, category C. So that on the left side, we are now giving the details of what the types of drugs abuse are. Then the causes of drug abuse. Maybe we want to talk about, we want to categorize maybe causes into social causes, economic causes, psychological causes, among others. So we'll talk about maybe social causes. We give what it is. Economic causes, the same. Psychological causes, the same. Then we talk about again the treatment of drug abuse. Probably here again, we might also want to divide them maybe into various methods. The therapeutic methods, maybe treatment using other drugs, then the non-therapeutic measures, and again other measures. So in kernel method, you'd simply divide your page into two parts. The first part, which is the left side, you put the major headings. Then on the left side, each major heading is accompanied with, is matched with detailed information that now explains it. The other method of note taking is called the mapping method. And in the mapping method, we simply mean a graphic representation. So when you talk about mapping, mapping is a graphic representation of the content of a lecture, which maximizes active participation and also affords immediate knowledge as to its understanding and also emphasizes the critical thinking part. Mapping method is a method that uses comprehension or concentration skills and evolves in a note-taking form which relates to each fact or idea to every other fact or idea. The method has two main components. We have the nuclear. The nuclear is a central theme that forms the discussion. And in our case, the nuclear can be seen as the main topic. And then we have the outliers. Outliers can be seen as the subtopics. Now, each subtopic can also has other headings depending on how detailed the information, the text, or the lecture is. Again, all this is now put in form what? In form of a visual representation. This method enables readers to visually track the content of the text, the lecture, the presentation, regardless, in addition to easily establishing the relationship between nuclear and outliers. And the method of note-taking is recommended when the lecture content is heavy and also when it appears that there is a better organization in terms of how the lecturer is moving with his or her presentation. Let's look at how in actual form it can be illustrated. So this is what we have as an illustration in terms of the mapping technique, where we have the nuclear. The nuclear is a central idea, the main theme that is forming the discussion. And that main theme is like the topic. So if you still proceed with the topic that we had on drug abuse, then at the center, which is the nuclear, is the drug abuse, which is the main topic. Then surrounding it are now what we call the subtopics, which we are calling the outliers. So you have a subtopic on the prevalence of drug abuse, a subtopic on causes of drug abuse, a subtopic on treatment of drug abuse, then a subtopic on types of drugs abused. So that in each of these, again, you are presenting the details. Cause of drug abuse, which ones are there? Prevalence of drug abuse, what it is. What is it? The treatment of drug abuse, how is it done? Types of drug abuse, which are the drugs that are mostly abused? Then you list them down in each of those boxes. So that a book or a text that can be as many as, say, 20 pages, it is possible to take notes and summarize it into one page with a very clear pictorial presentation that gives a summary of everything that is contained in the text. So that when you look at it, it gives you a total glimpse, a total impression of what the entire text is. The other method is called the chatting technique. The chatting technique. And this method helps the reader or listener to track conversation and dialogue words, phrases, and main points are recorded as the presentation progresses. The method involves drawing lines to divide the page into columns and rows, with the topics placed on the left side and subtopics on the columns. Notes are then placed into appropriate column that best fits the headings of various columns. Let's see, in terms of illustration, how this method of note taking looks like. So this is what we have. We are still proceeding with our discussion, or we are still using drug abuse as an area for purpose of illustration. So main column on the left, we have drug abuse, and that is the main topic. Then we have other columns, and each of those columns, now we have the various areas that constitute the discussion on the drug abuse. These areas are prevalence of drug abuse, types of drugs abused, causes of drug abuse, and the treatment of drug abuse. So that what we have is something like, if it is prevalence, we have something on A, on B, on C, on D, on E. So all those ones represent the detailed content of what we want to discuss. Then we have types of drugs abused. Again, A, B, C, D, E. The causes of drug abuse, cause A, cause B, cause C, cause D, cause E. Then we have the treatment of drug abuse, which is treatment A, treatment B, treatment C, treatment D, treatment E. Again, when you look at all these, again, we can put the entire text that comprises even up to 50 pages. Again, we can freeze that information in form of notes into one page. The last method that we have is called the SQRRR, or sometimes it's called SQ3R. What are they in full? S stands for survey, Q stands for question, the first R stands for read, the second R stands for retrieve, and the third R stands for review. Survey, which is the first S, involves skimming the text to get an overview and develop a sense of which parts or sections might be useful. That is just going through the text without detailed reading, just scanning through the text just to see what is it that is there. Then Q implies that the reader comes up with some questions which are used as a guide while undertaking a comprehensive reading of the text. Then the first R is the next step, which involves reading the text actively with a view to finding answers for the questions that have been identified earlier. Then R, which is retrieve, requires the reader to begin processing and understanding the material by recalling the main points as if they are being explained to someone else. Then the other R is review, that demands of the readers to repeat the key points back to themselves in their own words. This is the method that most students normally use, where, for instance, they go to the library, they look for past papers. After looking for past papers, then they pick textbooks. So this is normally what a lot of students do, where they go to the library, they look for past papers, they go through questions, then they retrieve textbooks that they think can enable them get answers to the questions. It's a good method, yes, but not the very best. The best method normally is the other four. This one should be employed at the very last minute, when now you have thoroughly read and you are now ready. So you want to test yourself and see whether you can answer some of the questions that have been set in the past. Up to that point, we come to the end of our discussion and presentation on the techniques or styles of note taking. I want to thank all of you for your time, and I want to encourage you to raise any issue or question that you may have on any area so that I can respond to it at appropriate time. Thank you so much.